if it needs guts to be the fourth speaker in the last session of the day, I'm shaking right here to be the last speaker in the last session of the day. So thank you again. Sorry. Thank you so much. Each of us have thanked you. I hope you know that we are very grateful for your presence, because we've seen sessions where by the end of the day people are completely panned out. A lot of us talk about how K-12 is growing and growing rapidly. The CAGR reports talk about a 15 to 20% flat year-on-year growth. You've heard other numbers in this room before. 200,000 schools to be created in the near future. 100 crore or people to be educated if education is to be considered a continuous learning process. Historic data shows that private schools are on the rise. And one of the earlier speakers mentioned that government schools have almost stopped. No new government schools in the K-12 sector is being created, which really means that this huge demand is going to be met by private players. Today, 6 to 7% of the market is private schooling. The rest is still government. But you'll be surprised that the 6% of private schooling caters to nearly 40% of school-going children. A couple of things have changed in the past decade. With the onset of IB schooling, fees started to be in the range of 6 to 13 lakhs a year. Before that, as Indian parents, we were used to paying measly 100 rupees because grant and aid schools took 100 rupees a month. It's the IB school system that helped bring about quality, because a middle income group parent started to look at school fees as an investment. And soon, not that 200 rupees IT deduction is of any significance, but at least the income tax started to say that school fees is a deductible expenditure. I represent Calorx from Gujarat. We work in the entire vertical from preschool to university. And if you study any sector strategy reports from education, the #1 requirement of this country is teachers training. If you're going to create 200,000 schools, who's going to teach? The hard reality is none of these school students that everybody here sits and runs wants to be a teacher. No urban child wants to become a teacher or adopt teaching as a career. So how are we going to produce quality teaching staff who are going to be in charge of handing over education? It just cannot be technology. It cannot be design. At K-12, a teacher is a role model. A face-to-face teaching is very critical for young children. But we don't have teachers. We don't have anybody recruiting for teachers. The Teachers University that I run has semi-rural intake, does not have urban intake. And you know the technology term, garbage in, garbage out. We run a 4-year program. How much value addition can you do to a tribal student to put him to an elite school as a good teacher? Having said that, we talked earlier that India's literacy rate has really gone up in the last decade, but the Human Development Index still puts it very, very low at 61, 71%. Not very, very healthy. Although, the bottom of, if you look at the literacy distribution, the worst hit is the bottom of the pyramid. But that is exactly where the government is already working. Universalization of primary education, which is the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, is working right there to make sure that we somehow improve the bottom of the pyramid. Or even the ATI, where private schools are going to participate in quality education for that bottom of the pyramid. So there are solutions, because these reports are available, these reports are being attended to responsible people in the government. We're hoping that the next decade will not be as bad as the past one. There's a huge opportunity that exists for starting K-12 schools, and that's written all over the wall. I'll run you through a couple of things that become important when you want to start a school. The first one is regulatory. All said and done, it is still a regulated sector. The first one is you need to choose what board you want to go for. You know it's a concurrent list education. So there's a state board option, there's a national option, and then the international options. So either you choose your state board, go with the IGCSE or IB, or go with your CBSE and ICSE. Sometimes schools are offering multiple boards at 10th grade. When you choose your board, there are enough challenges in the state board because you have to first get affiliated to the state board and then de-affiliated through an NOC. And then you need 3 different NOCs, one for primary, one for middle, and one for secondary. Each time you have to go back, and these are slightly longish procedures depending on how each state deals with them. And then some states are very highly fee regulated. The NCR region and Tamil Nadu are case in points. So I know that there's a McDonald model available, which is a low fee, high volume model for education. And then there are models available which are high fees and low volume, like an IB school. Infrastructure I already talked about, everybody's talked about, so I'll just briefly touch upon brick and mortar, IT, busing, etc. Hiring can be a big challenge, like I already brought to you. You do not have teachers. You have to make do with whatever teachers you recruit and then do in-service training. If finding a good teacher is a big task, finding a dynamic principal is like God has stopped manufacturing dynamic principals. It is an impossible task. And if you don't have the right person in the right chair, you don't have a project to kick off. And if you see our teachers training institutions, there are no education leadership programs. Pata kya hota hai? We take a good teacher, unko principal bana dete hain. So the school system has lost a very good teacher. And this teacher has no administration experience. So she is struggling and learning on the job. We went on to a parallel method where we said we will bring an MBA person and he will be the administrator and the principal will be the academic in charge. So the school started to have 2 parallel leaders, an administrator and a principal. And they were constantly at loggerheads. And the job of the trustee was only day-to-day solving problems. Ego hassles and all of that, you know how it works, right? So finding a principal who's a manager, who's a visionary, who's an academician, who's a customer-centric person, who's a student-centric person, not there. And then everything else on one side, academic excellence on one side. What happens inside the classroom is all that parents care about. It really doesn't matter what a swanky building you have, what IT infrastructure you have. If each and every child is not learning, I don't think parents value anything else except classroom teaching, learning mechanism. So there are a huge bunch of academic development processes, your textbooks, your almanacs, your admission processes went through the roof. You've all read about what happens in Delhi in preschools. You've also all read about when you give admission, by now there is a 10-pointer. There's hardly any flexibility a school has to give admissions. There are 10 pointers. बच्चा कहाँ रहता है, उसके parents क्या करते हैं, transferable job है कि नहीं है, girl child है कि नहीं है, sibling है कि नहीं है. You do the 10-pointer, you do a descending order in Excel sheet, your admission process ready. This in a nutshell is the education sector. So you have your preschools, K-12, ICT, which is, the educoms of the world have shown that there's a huge sector out there. Vocational, a lot of us have discussed the lack of skilling in the country, and of course higher education, which is the most regulated sector. The key challenges are lack of infrastructure in our country, access, all of that we've talked about once, lack of teachers, dropout ratios are still very high, and as we all ramp up, children are still begging in the street. Children are still doing labor. We may be very altruistic and say that all children should be in school, but the reality is sometimes the child is the earning member. And if there's no father in the house and the child is the only earning member, no matter how much altruism we may have, it's more important he earns than gets to school, because who's going to feed the rest of the children and the mother in the house? We also talked about how, what's emerging today is because there is what we call a name brand schools, even in K-12, there are some emerging models. And there is a lot of private equity money that's flown into this sector. And that's an asset-light model. Some of the speakers have mentioned that having your own land is very important. But a private equity would like an asset-light model, which means lease is becoming very, very accepted. The CBSE, ICSE laws are also flexible. They allow you to rent a place for about 30 years and give you affiliation. So lease as a model is becoming very widely acceptable in the market. Managed model is basically a school is not doing well. You want to change it from a vernacular medium to an English medium, or a state board to a national board. So a private player comes in and manages the school. And this is a term that, franchisee people use a lot, COCO and COFO, if some of you have heard it in the room, which is company owned and company run, and company owned and franchisee run, organized. So these are the models that are really accepted in today's markets. I want to just talk about branding. Earlier days I belong to a school of thought where we said we should not market schools. Marketing should be the faith that the parent has in us. It should be a word of mouth. We should get referrals. No longer true. Today we market schools like an FMCG product. So I have on the left column what we call above the line strategies, branding marketing strategies. And on the right column I have below the line marketing strategies. If I just point out some, we go through hoardings. We do leaflets in the newspaper. There are signages, there are mobile road shows, TV scrolls, TV advertisement, name it, we do it. Below the line strategies, market surveys, all kinds of competitions, door-to-door campaigning, plying your vehicles with your names, I've seen people marketing in malls, parents' workshop. Like I said, it's a product today. Dr. Veera Gupta mentioned that money is no longer a dirty word in education. So we've broken all barriers. We market like any new product. I mean, companies really do have a launch budget. When you enter a new city and you have to launch the school, there's a huge launch budget. That is a strategic decision that is outsourced to people, image builders. So it can look something like that. My last slide. Money can come in through, to create a good quality K-12 school. What does it cost? 20 crores? Easily? Easily upward of 20 crores. And no individual can pump in that kind of money. So the money has to come from an external source. The best way to grow that anybody will tell you is debt management. Take a bank loan, mortgage your property, and then build. But you know how bankers are? They will not give you money when you need it. If you have the money, they'll give you money. जब बारिश होती है ना, they will not open the chhatri at that time. So it becomes difficult for people to get started on debt. But that really is the cheapest way to grow, because at the end of the day, you're growing at, your cost of finance is about 10%. And, goes up to 12 or whatever. But if you go through equity, you get the money faster. Venture capital, angel broking, equity funding. These are all options for entrepreneurs. These are funds that will come to you when you don't have the money, because they trust you as a promoter, they trust your capability, and they want to see growth. But that's slightly high. It will put your cost of finance will be around 16, 18, 20, 22, 28, depends on what they can negotiate with you. So that's a high end. It depends on where you are, but those are the opportunities. In conclusion, I will say that education is a sunrise industry. They're going forward the next 5-10 years. There is no looking back. There's a huge demand. So if you're thinking of getting into K-12, you should. But I will ask you to check your intention. This is not a field that will give you very quick returns. It's capital intensive, it's high gestation period. It's very gratifying if you love children and if you have a passion for the job. It's extremely gratifying. But it plays out long. It's a game that you have to hang on for 10, 15 years before you see real results. So check your intentions. If they match with the industry intentions or the growth of the industry, this is a great place to be in.